We are starting a brand new unit. We are in period 5. Period 5. So if you're wondering what unit we're in, we are in period 5. So from now on, you're in period 5, and you can put everything else into period 4, and we're in a new period. Yeah.
Why do the periods matter?
Why do periods matter? Because it's kind of like a unit. So it's like when your teacher teaches you a unit, it's like everything is similar. So this time we're talking mostly about the Civil War. Or next time we'll talk about the Gilded Age. It's just separating them just like in a normal class with a unit. Also, it makes a difference because each of your essays, you'll only have one essay per period. As in, you won't get 3 Civil War essays in the same AP exam. You'll have them in different periods. All the DBQ and the SAQs, those kind of things, can be similar, but it helps separate them out. Also, the first one and the last one are only 5% of the exam. It's very short. Okay? All right, so on your Reformers packet, if you will flip to the third page, the third page, the one that says women's rights on it.
That's what she said.
Now, this was that part of the packet that we did not cover in the last test, okay? But there's a little bit in this period. Guys, come on. There's a little bit in this period that are going to talk about it. Now, if you see this picture that's up on the board on the AP exam, there is a term that should come to everybody's mind when you see this picture. And what term is that? The Cult of Domesticity. Exactly. Okay? So remember, this is like your historical context. Prior to the American Revolution, women are bound by the Cult of Domesticity. As the American Revolution comes along, people begin to feel like they have more rights and more abilities. And because of that, they want to have more political rights as well, which is what begins the women's rights movement during this time. Now, when we talk about the impact of this is going to be kind of like the start of the first wave of real feminist political movements in the United States. Their first attempt at it. Now, the reality, though, is that this is not going to be as successful during this time. It's more successful during the second wave, but they are going to attempt to do so. Now, one of the major differences is that they're going to begin to start to put out constitutions and declarations and writings saying that we want more rights. Now, the place that this is going to be called, and this is on both your Reformers notes as well as the notes you picked up today, if you will highlight the Seneca Falls Convention. When you see Seneca Falls Convention, it's under the section that says Expansion of Women's Rights. When you see Seneca Falls Convention, you automatically know it's women's rights movement in the mid-1800s. Now, the one big thing that happens during that is different than normal is going to be this thing that's on the right, which is this thing called the Declaration of Sentiments. Now, what happens is that they're going to take the U.S. Declaration of Independence and they rewrite it for women, which you can see on the right. Their goal is basically to say that we are now declaring that we want more women's rights in the United States. Now, what were they trying to break away from? It wasn't just getting suffrage. It wasn't just breaking from the cult. There were other things as well. So, for example, they're going to advocate for abolition, right? We've talked about that before with some of the abolitionists that we did in the Reformers. They're going to want to break away, for example, and have temperance or prohibition. What is that prohibiting? Alcohol, exactly. They also are going to advocate for other things, such as the ability to have marriage and divorce whenever you want and not relying on the men. Even the idea of having bloomers, which were like half pants kind of things, was a huge deal to women because they could be able to wear something that wasn't a skirt. Now, in terms of the people that you would need to know, the two ones that I would star on this are going to be Susan B. Anthony, and she's probably the most important one. So star Susan B. Anthony. This would probably be good on your Reformers packet as well, so you know enough about them. And then star Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Those are going to be the two most famous. Susan B. Anthony, especially most famous during this time. Elizabeth Cady Stanton lives like another 50 years. So she becomes also famous in the second wave of attempting to get more rights. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to attempt to change the world through civil disobedience, as in breaking the law to purposely show that it is wrong. Susan B. Anthony, back on November 5th, that was like 3 days ago, actually had the 150th anniversary of what she did in an attempt to be able to help. Does anybody know what she did that was the anniversary?
Didn't she dress up like a Jew and vote?
Yeah, so she illegally voted. So she showed up and she voted illegally. She was arrested and charged and given a $100 fine, which you say, oh, that's no big deal. That's about $3,000 in today's money. Okay? So they're going to charge her, but she kind of becomes like the symbol of this movement to be able to gain more and more rights. Now, things that you need to know in terms of general things about women's rights movement. If you will, under next to where it says suffrage, remember the right to vote? We had a bunch of people in their LEQs write that suffrage meant to suffer or women suffering. It's just the right to vote. You can also gain suffrage not just for women but for anybody. So, for example, last year after the Parkland shootings, Florida attempted to lower the age of voting to 16 because they felt like if you want to be able to change your gun laws in Florida, you should be able to vote. It failed. However, that's an example of gaining suffrage. Now, if you will write next to suffrage, failed. And that's one of the really important things during this time, is that while they did attempt to gain more rights, they did fail to do so during this time. Which brings us to starting into chapter 12. Chapter 12. Now, we're going to be talking about immigration in the mid-1800s, and there's 3 groups of people that you really need to know for this immigration. So if you will maybe write next to this, these 3 groups, you need to know the Irish. And if you will double star that, that's the most important one to be able to study. You need to know the Germans. And you need to know the Asians. Now, yeah.
Wait, what were you writing down?
I would write next to where it says immigration in the mid-1800s. Now, in terms of the AP exam, there are really 3 big waves of immigration. They will try to trick you. They will say Italy or something along those lines. If you see these 3 words, Asian's the only one that kind of spans several times periods, but you need to make sure that if you see especially Irish, you go to the mid-1800s. So we're going to go through each of these and really talk about why they came, what impact did they have, but today we're going to have a common theme, and that common theme is mostly going to be racism, anti-immigrant sentiments. Do we have in today's world people who are anti-immigrant?
Yes.
Yes. All the time, right? Now there's different forms, but we're going to talk about not illegal immigration because that's a whole other thing. We're talking about just the idea of somebody not born in the United States. An example of that, for example, we had a couple weeks ago in New York, there was a restaurant that was a Mexican restaurant. All the people who worked there were legal immigrants or native-born citizens. They were speaking Spanish, and a guy attempted to attack them for speaking Spanish in the United States. There's a massive fear of immigrants all throughout, and we see that as a continuity during this time as well. So we're going to start with the Asian immigrants to the United States. Now, in terms of Chinese immigration, if you took AP World, I have some good news for you. Everything that you learned in AP World about Asia in the mid-1800s, the Opium Wars, the extreme poverty levels, the decline in all these different things, you can use that in this class on an essay because it's historical context. If some of you are looking at me and you're like, I never learned any of that in AP World, my other 2 classes said they did, so I don't know what happened. But that's okay. Basically what I would say is this is usually when I start to get the Opium Wars talked about a ton in their essays. Now what happens is in Asia, there is a ton of discontent, a ton of anger, a ton of poverty, and people want a better life, and they're going to come to the Americas. So in terms of the cause, okay, so if you will write on your paper next to Chinese immigration, if you will put the cause, there's going to be 2 major causes. The first one is going to be a massive source of income going on right now in California. What is going on in California in the late 1840s that would cause people to want to come to California?
Gold rush.
The gold rush. So the number 1 cause is going to be the gold rush. Now the second cause directly is because of the gold rush. The reason why is because now people want to be able to make money and send back home. So the second cause is to send money home. Now, why would this be? Well, the thing is that people didn't want to come to America to be American. That wasn't the goal. They didn't want to say, I hate China, I'm coming over to America. That really wasn't what was happening. Instead, people wanted more economic opportunities to help their home life. So what people would do is they would come, they would begin to gold pan, and they would begin to try to find something to send back home. Now remember, in terms of the dates, the easiest way to remember the date is think of the football team. Okay, the San Francisco 49ers are called that because 49ers are minors in California because remember the gold rush starts in 49. So that will really help you on an exam when you're thinking about this time period. Now, in terms of the increase of immigration, beginning in this 49, we begin to see a rapid increase in Chinese immigrants into the United States. In particular, by the late 1800s, Chinese immigration is going to massively skyrocket, particularly in California. Now, the problem with this is going to be the conflict. And if you will now make a little area that says conflict next to Chinese immigrants. Mostly male, if you see like the bullet says mostly male, there's a little bit of space there. If you will put the conflict, why did racism massively begin in California? Well, the first conflict is the most obvious one. It is job opportunities. And right now in California, what's the big job opportunity that the Asians are coming to do? They're mining. So if you will put in parentheses, the gold rush. The gold rush is what I said. Now, basically, what's going to happen is I want you to think of gold. Okay, whatever you know about gold. Is there an infinite amount of gold in the world today?
Probably not.
No. Gold takes a long time. It's just like any other mineral. It has a limited supply. Therefore, in California, does California have an unlimited supply of gold? No. So if there's more miners coming in, does that increase or lower your chances of being able to find gold? Decreases massively. Basically, as these immigrants come in, and as the mining, it's already, we know that the mining was bad, but it doesn't matter because now, instead of it being the gold's fault and that there's not enough gold, guess whose fault it's going to be? The Chinese and the Asians. If these Chinese didn't come in, I'd be finding gold. And oh, that Chinese man, he found gold. Well, that's because he took mine. If we didn't have immigrants here, I'd be rich. Do you guys see why there was an increase of this racism? People were fearful of this is the problem of why I'm not making any money in the United States. Now, in terms of positives, so if you will put somewhere in here the effect of Chinese immigration, one major effect of Chinese immigration is going to be the creation of ethnic communities. And what is the most famous of all the Asian ethnic communities? It's Chinatown, or I haven't heard it called Little China. There's Little Italy, though, which is in New York. Okay? It's going to be Chinatown. Has anybody ever been to San Francisco? Raise your hand if you've been to San Francisco. Keep your hand raised if you've been to Chinatown. All right, so a lot of people. In Chinatown, would you find an Italian restaurant? No. What about some really nice McDonald's? Not really, no. If you go throughout the streets, unless you're on the corner of like the end of Chinatown, you're not going to find that, right? Because Chinatown is going to be ethnic community. Why this is going to happen is because you want to be next to people who can speak your same language. Why would I want to live somewhere where nobody can understand me? And the rise of Chinatown is going to be very important. Now, what's going to happen is that they are also going to become known for certain professions. And one of the most famous was what is called the Chinese laundry. Now, traditionally, when you take your stuff to a laundromat, it would be maybe 10 minutes of washing, a couple hours of drying, and it's done. With the Chinese laundry, it's actually going to be about an 8-hour laundering process. Multiple times being washed, multiple times being dried. You could see him spitting on the clothes. That's actually to get the stains out. That's like an old wives' tale. And so what would happen is as these Chinese laundries begin to increase, they become a staple in these Chinatowns, and people become known for it. However, remember the racism part. As time begins to go on, we begin to turn more racist in a lot of our depictions of these Asians in California. This is where you get like the very stereotypical thing that some people dress up very inappropriately at Halloween, trying to be Asian, right? That comes from these stereotype things. For example, why would people hate these people so much as well is another problem, is going to be women. You see, you have to remember that other places in the world are not like the United States. They have different morals and values. Now, here in the United States, we have Protestantism, Cult of Domesticity, women's virtue, things like that. Other countries, though, have a very common profession that is very common for women and totally acceptable, and that's prostitution. The Chinese bring over this prostitution, and by this time in 1870, almost 2/3 declared that their profession is prostitution. Now remember, here in the United States, this is seen as really, really bad, right? Very unvirtuous, very unclean. However, a lot of other countries, it's completely acceptable. If you go over to Germany, you'll walk past like a restaurant, and you walk past some shop, and you'll have like an apartment building, and then there'll be a brothel. It's not uncommon, you see it all the time, it's not hidden. Now the thing is though, is that people see this as delinquency, so it's going to be your second conflict, is bringing delinquent behaviors into the United States, in particular prostitution. A lot of people blame the increase in prostitution on the Chinese, even though prostitution was I wouldn't say it was very, very, very used, but it was still a profession that people knew about during this time and did. But of course it's going to be blamed on the Chinese. And because of this, we begin to have our racism. So you can see things like this. People begin to feel very, very discriminatory against this job competition. It's their fault. If the Chinese hadn't come, this thing wouldn't have happened, or this thing didn't happen. It's placing blame on another nationality for our problems in the United States. Now, what's going to happen is, as the job competition increases, such as with the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, this racism is going to massively skyrocket into these depictions of these Asians. And we'll talk about this a lot more in the next period as well when we talk about the Transcontinental Railroad. But let's go to the Irish. And this is going to be, again, double star, must know the Irish, probably the most important on this entire thing is going to be Irish immigration. Now, the cause of the Irish immigration, if you will highlight the Great Potato Famine, and make sure that you star that term. The Great Potato Famine, remember, make sure you write down that it's going to be the cause of Irish immigration. Now, what happens is, in Ireland, in the mid-1800s, there's a staple food product, and it's going to be potatoes. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a disease in the potatoes that is going to kill almost all of the potatoes in Ireland. And this causes a massive famine, with people dying extensively during this time. In fact, almost an eighth of the entire population dies from this potato famine. Now, why would it be such a big deal? People are like, well, it's just potatoes. Think about Asia. What's the main staple food source in Asia? Rice. Imagine if all the rice were gone all of a sudden. Yeah, it would be a huge thing, right? And so what happens is that people begin to fight and even kill each other over these food sources. So really one of the main, again, causes of people coming over is trying to find a better life where you actually don't have famine and things like that. Now, what's going to happen is that with this potato famine, as you can see from this chart, notice that in this chart, in 1830, that's when it begins, is we are going to have a decline in the population of Ireland and Europe. What would be the first reason of why this would immediately decline in that date? What's the most obvious reason? Death. Exactly. People die. Yes?
Why does Ireland have almost 3 times the population of Europe?
Because they eat so many potatoes. They're good for you.
Well, Europe and Ireland have different scales on the thing. Ireland's scale is on the left, and Europe's is on the right.
Yeah. So this is over here. This is Europe. Over here, this is Ireland. Okay? All right, listen. So what happens is, first off, we have this massive decline, and then you notice that we have an additional decline happen in the years after that. Why do you think, based on what our topic is today, that we're going to have an additional decline?
Immigration.
Exactly. Or in this case, it would be the emigration, as in EM. That means leaving a country. And so they're going to leave and come to America. Now, if you ever go to New York, you can go to this thing called the Irish Hunger Memorial. The Irish Hunger Memorial is basically in memory of all those people who died. If you actually look underneath, it has this like weird tilt, and people are like, that's weird, why isn't it flat? Underneath, they actually have a list of all the major famines that have ever happened in the world. And anytime there's a famine or an outbreak where food sources decline, they add that name to the list. Okay? Now, in terms of what's going to happen next, they're going to come to America on what is called a coffin ship. Why is it called a coffin ship? Because everyone's dying. They didn't have a lot of food. They spent a ton of money to come over. It was actually the equivalent of an entire year's rent to come over to the United States on one of these ships. And people were dying all the time because they were malnutrition and starving. And another problem is you had the outbreak of what is called scurvy. Now, scurvy is because of a vitamin C deficiency. You don't have enough vitamins in order to survive. Now, a quick warning. You're going to see gross pictures. You do not have to look at the gross pictures if you do not want to. You can look away. There's going to be a drawing first and then real life pictures, but please just be aware of that. Some of you, that makes you want to look at it more, but whatever works. Okay? So, first off, when you have a vitamin C deficiency, your body cannot create skin. Every day you guys lose thousands of skin cells. When all those skin cells run out and you can't recreate it, you go down to the muscle and then you go down to the bone. This creates all of these welts. Also, your gums are relying on vitamin C. Your gums turn white, your teeth begin to die, and they eventually fall out. Now again, warning, 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 warning. Some of you are like, I want to look. Okay. Now, scurvy still exists today. If you look on the right, this is where you start to get into that muscle where you're going so deep down into the blood veins that you begin to have all these little spots. Now, when you think if you get rid of scurvy, because scurvy is treatable over several years of adding in vitamin C to your diet, if you say, well, then I'll be clean, right? These are the scars that are permanently on your body following that time. So your body is covered in that for the rest of your life. Additionally, as the photos on the left show, is that your gums turn white and basically mold because you don't have that vitamin C. And then eventually your teeth get so worn out and dirty that they can fall out. And you can also have the inability to bite because even with your gums are so sore that if you bite, you literally have tissue falling out of your gums. Yeah, it's awful. Now there is, though, a cure to scurvy. And if you've ever seen like the Pirates movies, they actually reference it a couple of times. If you look at their teeth, this is scurvy right here. Okay, obviously this is not real because it doesn't have real scurvy. But this is what scurvy looks like, and the yellow eyes is also a sign of vitamin deficiency. But there is a way to solve scurvy, or at least it was an old wives' tale. Anybody know what the way to solve scurvy was?
Fruits and vegetables? Orange juice.
Well, it's a...
Citrus fruits. Vaccination.
It is orange juice.
Oh, let's go.
Did you just guess that, or did you know that?
No, it was a joke I made earlier.
You were joking about scurvy and oranges?
I was like, why didn't they just drink orange juice?
Oh, well, that's how they solved it. So what they would do is on these ships, they might not have hardly any food and you're eating like bread and soup every day, and then they would have thousands of pounds of oranges waiting to help solve the scurvy problem. Now, as they're coming into the United States, though, obviously we know there's going to be a lot of death. This is a memorial to the Coffin Ship. This is in Ireland. If you notice, this is supposed to portray a ship, like a ghost ship, and then it has all these crashing waves. These are supposed to represent the waves. When you zoom in on the waves, it actually is souls. Yeah, it's skeletons. And so this is kind of representing the massive amount of death that occurred during this time. Now, as they came to the United States, though, they are going to go to work, especially in New York. Now, the women are going to go to work as positions such as maids, laundresses, which I don't know if that's an actual word, launderers, okay? But they're going to go to work, but the men in particular are going to be hard labor positions. You might want to know that. The men are going to be extremely hard labor positions. And part of the reason because of this is because they wanted to prove themselves. Ireland was very much small town. They wanted to be able to show their strength. And in particular, there's one object, here's your hint, that represents what they built. Anybody else have any guesses? Some people have said it already. It is the Brooklyn Bridge. Okay? Now, if you meet an Irishman in New York, they are very, very proud of the fact that the Irish built the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, were they the only ones that built it? No, but they're not going to say any of those other people. They're going to say that they were the Irish and they built the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, in terms of why they did this, so this is another continuity. Okay, so maybe if you want to write down a continuity or a similarity between the Chinese and the Irish, is they're going to send money home. Typically around 70 to 80% of their income went right back to their families. It was not about becoming American. It was not about immigrating to a new country and having a better life. It was helping the people back home in Ireland be able to survive. Now, this is where the big controversy happens. And you'll want to, somewhere in here, put down the controversy. And it's going to be with religion. So your big controversy, number 1, is religion. And let's kind of explain what's going to happen. So, in this picture, okay, you have England on the right, who is going to be Protestant Christian, okay? And on the left, you're going to have the Catholics. Now, why are they Catholic? The Romans came in and attempted to be able to take them over through the Norman invasion. They succeeded in terms of putting in their religion, and Ireland is going to become Catholic. If we can compare this to now, what we can see is something like this. This is going to be the density of Catholicism in Ireland. As you can see, it is massively... Am I the one who heard that?
No.
Okay.
Dragging around the table.
Oh. I don't know. Every time I hear those, I worry it's an alarm. Okay. So, Catholicism in Ireland, though, is going to be so prominent that it's still prominent in today's laws. For example, they have some of the strictest laws in the world for morality issues. For example, up until this year, abortion was almost 100% illegal. Any form of abortion whatsoever. They just barely made it legal that in terms of if a woman's life is at stake, you can now perform an abortion. But other than that, that's it. There's no choosing to have an abortion. People actually sneak away to England to get an abortion. And it has to do with this Catholicism right here. Now, another thing that happened, though, is you had this dude come along who was a priest. Anybody know what priest this is? It is not Marco Polo. Marco Polo was not a priest. Okay? It is St. Patrick. And we celebrate something with St. Patrick, which is called St. Patrick's Day. Exactly. Now, St. Patrick was a priest. There was a massive snake infestation in Ireland. He got rid of the snakes, and so they started celebrating St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick is also known for something else. Now, if you know about St. Patrick's Day, you're supposed to find a 4-leaf clover, right? Wrong. It was actually, the 4-leaf clover thing is a United States tradition. It is actually that you're supposed to find a 3-leaf clover. Why would you want a 3-leaf clover? Ahem. Catholicism. Why would the 3-leaf clover? There you go. You got the hint. It's the Trinity. So it was actually lucky to find a 3-leaf clover because it was in celebration of the Trinity. Now, again, in terms of controversy with religion, if you will write down Catholic versus Protestant, and then highlight and star that. That is a must know. It is actually a key concept, is the rise of anti-Catholic sentiments in this mid-time. You must know this. Now, with all Catholicism coming into the United States, you have another problem. You see, Irish come over and they still want to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. But there's another thing that St. Patrick's Day is very well known for, which is this. And what is this? Well, we're going to say school appropriate, and we're going to say it's root beer. Okay? Now, listen. Now, beer consumption is going to raise when the Irishmen come. Part of this problem is because alcohol drinking is very, very much in the culture of Ireland. So people come over here and they're going to continue to drink. However, what is going on at the same time period in the United States? Okay. You're not wrong. Abolition was happening.
I was trying to say that.
Okay. So, it is, again, you're not wrong. Abolition did happen. But it's a temperance movement, right? Which is the prohibition of what? Alcohol. Okay? So your second controversy or your second conflict, is going to be alcohol. So again, your second controversy is going to be alcohol. Now, if you don't know about St. Patrick's Day in the United States, it is actually the highest day in the United States for DUI deaths as well as arrests in the United States. Anybody know what number 1 is? It is New Year's Eve. Anybody know what number 3 is?
Super Bowl.
You guys are like at numbers like 20 and 25. Not Leif Erikson Day. It's 4th of July. Thank you. Okay, listen. Kevin got it right. So, it's the 4th of July. Now, the problem is that this massive drinking comes with a lot of concerns. So, again, that's the controversy. One more fun fact as well is about the leprechaun. So, you guys know you go to the end of the rainbow, you go and find a pot of gold, and you get rich, right? That was actually not the original leprechaun. The original leprechaun was if you found him, it brought your family wealth. But we're not talking about like gold. We're talking about surviving poverty and famine. So if you were to find the leprechaun, the harvest would be good for the year. And then it would also provide food for your family and your village as well for several years to come. So that was the goal of the leprechaun. So if you go find a leprechaun, you're going to get lots of food, not necessarily money.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, well, it's sweet, but it's also sad because of why, because everyone died, okay? Now, when we look at the flag, okay, look at the Irish flag. Now, with Leif Erikson, or not Leif Erikson, now I'm stuck on that. Thanks, guys, okay? With St. Patrick's Day, and with like the whole four-leaf clover and things like that, on the left-hand side, green represents the Catholics. On the right-hand side, anybody know what the right-hand side is? Orange? It is the Protestants. Now, the reason why, it's getting into the Protestant Reformation, is that what's going to happen is that the Protestantism is going to cause tons and tons of bloody conflict over in Ireland. People killing each other over this break of what's better, Protestant or Catholic. In fact, they have these orders in Ireland that are Protestant orders. What these basically mean is that when you're part of this, you follow a strict law. For example, you cannot marry a Catholic. You cannot live in the same house as a Catholic. All of these are going to come from this whole Protestant idea. So what this is supposed to represent is you have the Catholics on the left, the Protestants on the right. This is supposed to be the peace between the two. Even up until today, there is not peace. If you are a Protestant Christian, you are heavily discriminated against in most of Ireland. Okay? All right, so in terms of the racism part, okay, so remember, racism is going to come from job competition. A lot of the ones with the Irish are going to have some sort of alcohol because of this alcoholism. And racism begins to occur and appear in several different things such as this. Which brings us, and this, by the way, one more thing. This is going to be the Catholics. Notice you got this Catholic priest. He's got like the cross and stuff. What else does he have? Nice big sword. And he's going to come and hurt the poor little boy with the Holy Bible. And he's going to come and destroy them all. Okay? Also, if you notice, the United States is being pulled into the Catholics. Gasp. Another religion in the United States. Okay? So, this is one of those anti-Catholic, anti-Irish things. Which brings us to Germany. Now, Germany is different. So, if you want to write down next to Germany, it is going to be different. Their cause of why they're going to come is going to mostly be, if you just write down adventure. A lot of them came because it sounded cool and fun and exciting to be able to come over to the United States. Okay, listen. Hey, some of you are getting distracted, and I can tell we're already 7 minutes behind the other classes, so we have to kind of hurry along. Okay? Now, the cause of this was adventure. The reason why, if you will kind of put in parentheses, this is really why it's so different, is they are going to be well educated, and they're going to be interested in the arts. Now, this is different than all the other ones. All the other ones were like poverty and famine and things like that. They just want to come. So we're going to see this rise in German education, but what did they help bring here to the United States? One of them is going to be education, especially for younger kids. You guys have ever heard of kindergarten? What does the word kinder mean?
Child.
In what language?
German.
Exactly. So the idea is that the Germans are going to bring over education for all, and especially the youth of America. Now the other thing they bring is the weekend. Over in Germany, these were well-educated labor union communities, and they believed in rights for workers. One of the things that they advocated for was the invention of the weekend. They would go out on the weekend and they would go to operas and plays and parks, and all these different amusement parks and things like that increased because the Germans are going to invest in it. Now the other thing though that they bring is going to be what?
Nice hat.
Yeah. Okay? They are going to bring alcohol. Now, if you want to put down the controversy, if you want to put down the alcohol. Now, yes, the Irish did bring beer, but that's because they took it from Germany. Also a lot of Irish whiskey as well. Now, the thing is, though, is again, just like in the Irish, is going to be that they are going to bring this alcohol when we're having temperance and things like that in it. Now, there is one really great thing that they brought over, though, and it has to do with St. Nicholas, and what is that?
St. Nicholas.
Which is for what holiday? Christmas. There we go. Now, here in the United States, people did celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. However, it was not a big celebration. It was very small. But the Germans went all out. Before this time, the Germans did things such as this. So they had an Advent instead of an Advent calendar. They have an Advent wreath. So what they would do is each week of the Christmas season, they would light one of these candles, and then eventually it would be Christmas. They also had the invention of Advent calendars. So what they had with the Advent calendars nativity sets, is the nativity sets would be these large, like little pyramid things that they would have. They also brought the Christmas tree over, and the idea of putting presents underneath the tree. And then when St. Nicholas comes on Christmas Eve, instead of like hanging around in your PJs watching movies on Christmas Eve, they actually clean the house. Sounds like fun, right?
Yeah.
Well, the reason they clean the house is because if St. Nicholas saw a dirty house, he would not leave gifts and presents. They would also have to shine their shoes because at night they would take their shoes, put them out on the porch. They would fill them with carrots because instead of reindeer, they had horses, and you feed horses carrots. The horse, as well as St. Nicholas, would come. He would look at his book of deeds to see if you were good or bad. And if you were good, you would receive candy as well as nuts. And if you were bad, you would receive what? Coal, exactly. Now, in terms of converting to today, in today's world, this is like Santa Claus, okay? Now, we've obviously changed a couple of these traditions compared to the Germans and how they did it. But if you look at this right here, is that this is going to be our German versus the United States traditions. We basically stole the majority of them. This is going to be one big, if you want to put down an effect of the Germans, is going to be traditions. Now, we bring a lot of traditions, including various sports, including various foods, into the United States because of the Germans. However, there is one tradition that we did not keep. As we all know, Santa Claus has some helpers. Who are the helpers of Santa Claus? Elves. The elves. Those elves do not exist in German. Instead, this guy exists in Germany. And here's what happens with this guy is at night, before St. Nicholas comes, is that this guy comes to your house, and if you were bad, he steals the little children, he chops them up into little pieces, and then he eats them. So, if you're bad this year and I don't see you after Christmas break, I'm going to assume that this is what happened to you. Okay? Now we did... So what?
But they get coal if they're bad.
This is like the really bad kids.
Oh.
Yeah. But the coal is like well, you didn't get eaten this year, but if you're not careful, you get eaten next year kind of thing. Yeah. Now, in terms of another impact of the German culture is going to be in the arts. Anybody know whose house this is? It's in Eisenach. It is Bach. Yeah, it also says it right there. Okay. Now, at Bach's house, though, you have to remember is that Bach is going to be a major composer during the 1700s. And what country is he from? Germany. And so what happens is all these people come in with all these arts and education to the United States. Now, Bach also, if you go to his house, you'll see that he was one of the major helpers who invented the modern-day piano. If you also go to his house, you'll see something really cool, which is one of the very first and the oldest that they have found so far in Germany, indoor toilets that have kind of a plumbing system. In fact, they had so much of a problem when they first opened the museum that people kept sitting on it, and they had to block it off with bulletproof glass. So if you were wanting to sit on Buck's toilet, you cannot. Apologize. It is behind glass. I know. Bummer. But when people... that's actually part of the problem that they had, too, is people thought it was a real toilet. Now, what happened, though, is as people came into the United States, this is what's going to happen. So it says, one American visited a German community where people drank coffee in tin cups, very rural, agricultural, while listening to a Beethoven symphony on the grand piano. It's the idea of going out into, like, the boonies and then having people listen to, like, Bach and Beethoven. They bring a lot of arts and culture into the United States. So at this point, they're not going to have as much racism as the Irish and the Asians, but that's all going to change with World War I, when basically they have extreme racism in the United States. Now, controversy over this. What's going to happen to these immigrants in politics? You can see these two. You got the beer right here and the Irish whiskey taking the ballot box. And what's going to happen is the rise of what is called the Know Nothing Party, which is a starred, highlighted, must-know term. Starred, highlighted, very important. Now, what happens with the Know Nothing Party is that they are going to be really the first major anti-immigrant minor party in the United States. Now, what this goal is their whole goal is to get rid of immigrants. And we talk about getting rid of immigrants, we're not talking about deportation. We are talking about physically getting rid of them, as in immigrant bodies begin to show up dead along the sides of roads. Or people begin to, for example, they begin to have these newspapers that portray this, and then people start to kill the immigrants. You would have examples, for instance, of people going to a Catholic church, and all of a sudden the Catholic church gets set on fire and everybody dies. Their goal is to get rid of anybody that they can. So why are they called the Know-Nothings? Well, when the police would come and say, hey, do you know what happened? Guess what they would say? I know nothing. I don't know how that person died, because I did it, but I know nothing. That was the goal here. In fact, you guys remember Millard Fillmore, first capital of Utah and stuff like that? When he re-ran for president for a second time, he actually almost won with the Know Nothing Party. So we did in the 1850s almost have a president whose sole goal was to physically get rid of immigrants. Okay? So we can kind of think about that. And don't bring a lot of politics into it, but we can kind of think about what would happen if your president, all their job was to physically get rid of immigrants, as in kill them or get rid of them. Now again, taking out modern politics, guys, history class. Now, this is kind of like an early Ku Klux Klan. The Know Nothing Party does begin to go away with the rise of the KKK, because now instead of immigrant fears, now they're going to increase in African American discrimination following the Civil War. And now we're going to begin our activities. So what you need to do is you should only have out your notes, something to write with, and possibly a highlighter. What? No, it's not a wolf. It's a German Shepherd. There's not that many German Shepherd connect the dots. I apologize. It's supposed to be a German Shepherd. Oh, he's good stuff. No, you did not finish. Flip it over. No, it's called saving paper.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Now we're saving that.
This way.